there's an art to being a good recording engineer. Now, at this stage of my career, I've got the kind of brand where labels will come to me. I would have a template. As soon as the artist walks in the booth, their voice sounds amazing. So then instantly they're like, okay, this is a sick studio. And then little tricks. So when they've finished it, do a couple beep chops, do a little stutter, gas them up, like add a little reverb effect, have a little master change. So when they leave it and they go in their car, it's thumping in their car. Even like try and organize features for them. So if I knew one artist and I knew another artist, I'd be like, well, you should do a song with him and da-da-da. Kind of shows them that you care. You're not just like, oh, come and do a 5-hour recording session, give me the money and then, you know, go home. Eventually you start gaining more accolades and you become one of the sort of like labels trusted.
Hi, we're back with another episode of the Producer Royalty podcast, and we are here today with the UK engineer legend, Sean D.
Yes.
In your studio, Signature Studios.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming, bro.
Thank you.
It's honestly, it's really like insane that this is my first time in London, and I've got to lock in with guys like you, like Wizard and 8 and them. So I appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to be on the show. Yeah, for sure. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Yeah. Well, so I want to start by touching on that, like, you do a lot in the industry. So you manage producers, you engineer for some of the top guys, you run the studio. And a lot of producers feel like they need a manager, but you find a way to kind of do all this at once. So, like, how does it look like for you? Do you feel like combining all this stuff, do you feel like you maybe overwork yourself? Like, how do you juggle having all this business stuff as well as the creative?
I mean, I used to, when I first built this place, kind of quickly found that I couldn't do everything myself. So I realized that I needed a good team around me, a good infrastructure. So now I've got my guy, Luke, who helps me on like all the admin stuff, all the business side of things. I've got my guy, Owen, who assists me with all my mixes. And yeah, like being able to have a team kind of, because I worked as an engineer for 15 years. Just solo, sort of like no team, nothing. Just I was very used to it on my own. But as soon as I started to branch out with the business things, get into producer management and stuff like that, I just soon realized that the workload can get difficult if you're just doing everything yourself. You know? Yeah. Especially if you're a creative, because when you're trying to be creative, but then you've got a load of contracts to sort out for a producer, it kind of blocks your mind. So,
that duality, like, so going from, you know, dealing with the contracts to then trying to actually go in the room and create something that's something that
it just really kind of blocks you. So yeah, just having a team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what how do you kind of delegate things? So like you said that Luke helps you with admin stuff. So what is admin, like what's some of the admin that goes into like running a studio?
Spreadsheets. Yeah. So I mean, we basically work off spreadsheets. So we'll have producer placement spreadsheets, we'll have session spreadsheets, we'll have my engineering spreadsheets, and Luke just kind of stays on top of it all. Because a lot of it is kind of communication. Nothing is too complex, but the challenging part is staying on top of everything, you know? Mm-hmm. And you kind of take it for granted. You don't think it's a big deal until you start getting a massive workload. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, oh, got to kind of figure it all out. But yeah, that's how we kind of stay on top of it here. And then with my engineering, it's just kind of like my assistant changed everything for me. With engineering, you have something called Deliverables. I'm not sure if you know.
I do not.
Yeah, so every mix, like for a major label, needs like a clean edit or a instrumental, a cappella, the project. So that alone can take half an hour to an hour per song just to get ready. So say you have an 18-track album, you can do the maths. But if I have an assistant, then I'll like double my productivity because I can just do the creative fun part and then pass it all on to him.
So what are the differences? Like if I'm an engineer and I start working with like a major artist and I'm working with a major label artist, like what are those deliverables and what are the differences between those?
Yeah, so any major label has quite extensive requirements in the contract before you get paid. So I think it's normally instrumental, a cappella, the project, a TV mix.
Project is like, what's that?
The Pro Tool session. So you have to send the session, the mix session.
So what takes so much time about that? Like in theory, can't you just exporting maybe?
Well, do you know what it is? Because we use hardware analog gear. So every run you do of the song needs to be printed. So you have to play back the song. So if you have a 5-minute song and you need to print it 10 times, plus you need to do a clean where you've got to take out all the swearing and that, it's just time consuming. It's not hard, it's just takes time.
Okay, so printing, what's that mean? Like if you're working with analog, that means you like literally have to run it through
play
there?
the song, yeah.
Yeah, you have to play it through there?
Yeah, each part. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Huh. So when you work with what else comes with kind of working with what's the difference between, or what's expected of you when you're working with like a major label artist, when you're engineering for a major label artist?
So
you have those deliverables, right? But like,
yeah, you have the deliverables. I mean, with a major label artist, the main difference is that you have to deal with A&Rs. So with an indie artist, you kind of just are more direct with the artist or with the manager. And it's a much simpler process. There's less chefs in the kitchen. So it's normally smoother. But with a major label, some A&Rs are great and they don't get too involved or too intrusive. But sometimes they can get a bit sort of, there's 3 A&Rs and a label president and they all want to give feedback. And then there's 2 managers and then there's the artist and then there's the artist's 3 friends. And everyone's giving feedback and it can get a bit messy.
Okay, so you have to find a way to balance all those, but then who takes priority? Like, I guess if you have the A&R whispering something in your ear and then the artist is whispering something and then like maybe president, like how do you even navigate that? Because you can't listen to all of them.
Yeah, always the artist.
Always the artist? Yeah.
Always the artist, yeah. So with me, I'll always, because I've had situations before where I've spoke to an A&R, I've sent the A&R the mix. The A&R's give me feedback. I've done the A&R's feedback. Then the artist will listen to it and be like, well, why did you do that to the song? And he'll take that out on me. So I make sure that when I speak to the A&R, I'll speak to the artist or try and get the link to the artist if I can, show them directly. And then I just kind of not ignore the A&R, but like the artist is the creator.
Wait, so what do you ask specific? Like if the A&R tells you something, I want this done. Like you ask the A&R, like, did you get this approved with the artist?
Yeah. I mean, in a polite way, I normally has the artist listen to this because I like to do all the feedback at once. Okay. Basically, that's what
you say?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Just because, A&Rs have one vision and artists have another vision sometimes.
Yeah. So you talked about in other interviews, like gaining trust with the label. Like that's kind of like, and you have to fight to have certain mixes to have certain mixes for people. So like what goes into that? Like if an engineer really wants to step it up and I want to start working with major label artists.
Yeah, I mean, the trust, it always stems from the artist. So I think it depends what stage you are and depends what reputation you have as an engineer, especially. So when you first get to a certain level in your career, when you're just breaking through, none of the labels or the A&Rs trust you. So no, and rightfully so, because you who are you? There's guys who have mixed 20 number ones who they can go to. They've got the budget. But if the artist really believes in you and you can grow that trust with the artist, then they will vouch for you. Okay. And when the A&R says, oh no, we want to use, Bob, who's done 20 number ones, they'll be like, no, I want to stick with Sean. And then you win. But eventually you start gaining more accolades and you become one of the sort of like labels trusted people. Okay. Yeah. And then, in the UK, there's a few sort of go-tos for different genres.
So I guess like if I'm an artist and I get my song, I record it and I'm ready to submit it to a label, what's kind of the workflow for getting the engineer involved, I guess? What happens after that? Like if they don't have one that they recommend, the label will...
So it varies because now at this stage of my career, I've got the kind of brand where labels will come to me when a song's already recorded and they just want to enhance it because I've got like a reputation. But initially, it was much more a sense of getting the artist to be like, no, you're going to stick with me, and you're a recording engineer. That's how you gain their trust.
Yes.
So you're in the room with them, you're recording them, and then you don't let them get someone else to mix it. You have to be like, no, you got to mix it.
So when you talk about fighting to get them to get the label to allow you to mix it, what you're really saying is like telling the artist in some way, like what will you say to the artist? Like if it's your client, like, hey, I would love to mix your song. Like,
I mean, it really depends on the relationship with the artist, but you just got to be like, look, I think I'm the best at mixing this song. I know your sound, that kind of thing. But a lot of the time, artists will just do what they're told from an A&R because really, at the end of the day, the person who's given you the £500,000 check, when they say they want to get it mixed by someone, the artist listens, you know? Sometimes they'll fight for you, but sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. You also talked about, like, engineers kind of being like an artist's secret weapon in a certain sense, right? Yeah. That's the verbiage you used, and how certain artists don't want to share their engineers with people. Like, that's a real thing. Like, artists like kind of gatekeep their engineers.
Yeah. I think initially, especially, there's like, because you it's like a combo. It's almost like with producers as well. It's kind of a similar thing. When you have a good producer artist combo or a good artist engineer combo, it can almost birth a whole new genre within the genre. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I do feel like some of the artists can sort of like gatekeep the engineers or like the producers, but eventually you get your dues.
Yeah. Hopefully. When you were starting off, how did most of your new clients come about?
Most of my new clients, I mean,
recording people, you said, right? Because I guess
so I mean, initially it was just my mates. So where I started,
that was when you real started. Yeah.
So initially it was just my mates, and then when I moved into a block where there was sort of like radio stations and stuff, I started meeting other artists. And then it's kind of just a snowball effect. You know, if you're good at what you do and an artist brings a feature, that feature will then be like, oh, no, you know what? How much do you charge? Or I want to use you. And then you just kind of grow.
How did you decide, or what do you think, maybe a better question is, like, for an engineer just starting off, like, how do you think they should approach, like, charging? Is there a certain amount you think that they should charge for? Or like how do you think that, looking at pricing yourself as an engineer?
When I feel like the industry's changed. So when I started, especially in the UK, so there wasn't a lot of money in music. So even if you're working with, like, say, a big artist at the time, say 10 years ago, there wasn't necessarily earning loads of money in the UK. So I used to almost do the bigger artists for free. And then I used to just charge sort of everyone else, basically, just to get my foot in the door. But nowadays...
Completely for free? Like
just for free.
No publishing any points or anything?
No, because I was just recording them. I'd just be like, come record. I just wanted them in the room, basically, And then I was even trying to film them and put their freestyles up on YouTube. And I was just trying everything. But eventually, as the scene got to a point where there was more money in it, so when songs done well, people would earn money. Because before, like back in the day, 100,000 views on a YouTube video was a success in the UK. And the artist isn't making any money out of that. He may be making a couple shows, earning a bit of change. Yeah. But now, a song does well on TikTok, the artist can get like $100,000 deal just off the one song. So now I feel like where the industry is at that point, you should always charge and get what you're due. But yeah, it's kind of difficult. I always believe that in that initial part of your career, you should be doing stuff for free or like just for the love of it and just push, because a lot of these guys and a lot of the young producers, they try too early in their careers to think they're worth more than they are now. I do feel. And it kind of like bites the hand that feeds them. You know, if you stay humble at that start of your career and just work hard, I feel like you build a better network, and people know that you're not just the guy who's trying to get them the money. You're the guy who loves it, you know, and then you get more respect. Yeah.
And like you would say that you would go the extra mile for like artists as well.
100%. Even me as an engineer, I always tried to do that. So I would always like try and get them beats. You know, I would mix their song in the session just to try and like, so they had a great version of it. I would even like try and organize features for them. So if I knew one artist and I knew another artist, I'd be like, well, you should do a song with him and da-da-da. Just so it just kind of shows them that you care. You're not just like, oh, come and do a 5-hour recording session, give me the money and then, you know, go home. You're more like building that trust.
I was just about to ask you, what is going the extra mile go? That's a great answer.
Yeah.
You would also say that you would try to get them, another interview we were talking about how like getting the mix done fast, or maybe like a version that they could listen to on the way out was like really valuable too. Like,
I mean, most artists will judge an engineer, especially a recording engineer, like even a producer now, because I feel like nowadays you kind of have to be a recording engineer if you're a producer, at least to an extent. But you have to be decent at recording. But how you build that trust is through being quick. So, I mean, normally how I would do it is I would have a template And as soon as the artist walks in the booth, their voice sounds amazing. So then instantly they're like, okay, this is a sick studio. It doesn't matter. My studio didn't look as fancy as this at first. And, you know, they're going, even if they go into a cardboard box, if they're hearing themselves in the headphones and you've got a good template, that's it. You're off to a good start. And then little tricks, you know, go the extra mile. So when they've finished it, do a couple beat chops, do a little stutter, you know, gas them up, like add a little reverb effect. And like, you just kind of make the room, and then have a little master change, so when they leave it and they go in their car, it's thumping in their car. So when they go into all these other studios, what tune are they going to play in their car? It's going to be the one that you gave them. So that's the kind of
shit. That's a lot of practical shit in one little thing. That makes a lot of sense, right? Damn, that's crazy. Do you think like people say that like kind of recording artists is easy? How do you feel about that?
Nah, this is bollocks.
Yeah.
so excuse my language, but there's an art to being a good recording engineer. Like I used to hear, because when I used to be just a recording engineer, it's kind of how every engineer starts. You don't normally just start with mixing. And then people used to be like, you know, disrespecting the recording engineer. Oh, it's just pressing a button. But there's great recording engineers, and then there's shit recording engineers. And if a good artist comes in the studio, it doesn't matter how good the artist is. If it's not a good recording engineer, you're not going to make a good song. So being a good engineer, it's an art in itself.
How do you approach kind of giving your input, like while you're recording an artist? Like what are some of the things that go on in your head?
So the vibe of the room and building a rapport with the artist is probably the most important thing. There's obviously, I'd say, two factors. It's building the rapport and just being a cool guy and making the vibe in the room nice and the artist feel comfortable to get the best performance. And then it's also speed. Because if you're slow, you just kill the vibe of the session. So you have to be fast. And then, of course, there comes later, like, you know, if your mix is semi-decent on the spot and that kind of thing.
But the most important thing is, like, the artist kind of wants to feel that, like, I do something, they fuck up, they want to get right back into it.
If an artist is in the booth and you're taking ages to hit, like, do another take, it just frustrates them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So do you have assistants? So, like, I'm not in the studio much at all. Like, I come from the business side. So, like, when I see, like, assistant engineer and, like, what are kind of, you kind of talked about it before, but could you talk a little bit, like, if I'm an engineer, I'm trying to scale quickly, like, where does an assistant really fit into specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, when I built this place, I've got several rooms. So when on my come up, for instance, I was just one guy who rented a studio, and I used to either charge for recording or use the studio for mixing. As soon as I expanded and I built like 7 studio complex, I realized that I couldn't do everything myself. So I've got about 10 recording engineers who are on call. And at any one time, I can call them to come in and do the sessions. And then I also have an assistant who does my mixing. So, doesn't do my mixing, but he helps me with my mixing and sort of does all the, not the boring parts, but, you know, so he preps the sessions for me, that he delivers the projects. But he also gives me a second opinion, which I find a great assistant will give you a second opinion. So
without, like, you'll ask for him for it, or he'll kind of still input it where
I want him to challenge me. I don't want him to just be like, oh yeah, this guy, this is a great mix. I want to sit back and be like, yo, what do you think? And then he's got the, like, you know, the oomph to tell me, do you know what? I do think that maybe the vocal could come up, or I do think the high end could be better. That's a great assistant.
Okay.
And that makes me trust him more to give him opportunities as well. So, you know, if I'm on holiday or something like that and a mix comes through from a big artist, I'll tell him, you know, you can do the mix because I trust him. So
do the initial mix and then send it to you and, like, you know, see how it comes out.
It depends. It depends. If the artist will let me use an assistant, if not, then I'll have to do it myself.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about building the studio out too. Like, of course, a lot of producers love to build a studio out, especially like one like this. And how did you approach building a studio out? Like, from kind of the beginning, I have this idea. So, like, I know you had, this is your 5th studio, I think you said, but I guess you could start wherever you want to start. But I want to.
I mean, I've always sort of built studios in terms of, like, so my first maybe 3 studios. One was in a garage and we converted it into a studio. One was in a warehouse, and I sort of built a booth in it and converted it a bit to a studio. Then I rented a semi-decent studio in 1087. But what I realized was it's a bit extortionate to the business model of just renting a studio. Because when I looked into the sort of numbers and crunched the numbers, you can rent a whole warehouse for a similar price that you're renting one studio in some of these complexes in London. So if you can get the capital together to convert the warehouse, then it's a great business model, you know? So yeah, that's where this idea came. And then, I mean, I was living in Barcelona for about a year when I was working with The Plug, and I had a recording studio over there. And then when I moved back here, COVID happened. Okay. And that's when I thought, you know what? Everyone was locked down, but they would still allow building work. Mm. So I thought, all right, cool. That's
perfect time.
Yeah.
So this is this spot specifically you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So at the time you were still renting. So when you say, I think you said this is your fifth studio, this is the first one that you own the whole thing, or
this is the first one where I've kind of converted it.
Yeah. Okay, that you built everything out yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be kind of your suggestion, is to, I guess, maybe look to rent out a big space or a bigger space and then convert it into multiple
if you can get the capital together, because that's obviously the issue, but if you can get the capital together, then you can, it's just a great better business model, because now I have 2 rooms which we rent out for sessions. I have a mixing room, I have a Dolby room, and then I have 4 rooms that we rent to tenants.
Okay.
As opposed to just renting one space.
See, I noticed that too. And you guys said you had so there's 3 main studios in this space, and then you rent out 4 of them to tenants. That's and with those, did you supply the equipment too, or you kind of like, this is like kind of a room or a mix of both?
You get a bit like a desk, that kind of thing. It's normally their own equipment.
That's amazing. And what's dope here is I've already met so many people just being in this space, like having that complex situation where it's like a hub of people. Like you said, that was kind of your goal for building this space out, right?
I mean, I've where I was before was a place called 1087, and it was really cool spot. Big up Rob, who runs the spot. I was one of the first people to have a studio there, even before it was finished. And I met some really cool people there, like Alex Perez, who's this incredible drum and bass producer. I met Foreign Beggars. There's Danny Hull, who does a load of pop stuff, and it was amazing just having that sort of community. But it wasn't sort of, I was known as the grime guy, I stuck out, and then what my aim with this place was to make a more sort of drill, grime, trap orientated studio, because there wasn't anything like that in the UK at the time. So
really,
so I know in America you have a few legendary ones, right? So that was the idea, and then it's kind of worked where, you might bump into a big artist, or you might bump into one of the top producers, but it's a lot of people from our scene. That's
amazing. That's so like, when you open a studio, I feel like there's just like a lot to think about, right? So I'm trying to think of like, how do you even know if you're able to get the clientele that you're able to bring here? Like, I know you've been doing it for a while, but like, did you have a way for kind of like projecting that, I guess?
So when you start a business, or what I've learned from starting a business, was you have this fairy tale of how everything's going to go, and you do the numbers in a spreadsheet, and if I get this amount of sessions, I can earn this much, and and I'll do this and that. Then you start and you're like, okay, shit, it doesn't always work out like that, and you have to build. And then you realize you didn't factor in this cost, you didn't factor in that cost. So it's just a massive sort of learning curve. And the best thing I've found with business myself is just being adaptable. So, learning what works and changing and going with it, and not being too like, I thought this would work and it's not working. So you got to just run with what works and make it work.
What are some like the mistakes that maybe that like you, or the unpredicted costs maybe that like when you open the studio, you're like, I wish I would have known this before I opened it?
That's a tough question. There's a lot of them.
There's a lot.
Well, obviously, the energy costs from the Ukraine war and all of that stuff. That was a massive blow for business. So, yeah.
I can't imagine what that number could be.
Well, your energy bill went up 4 times.
So really?
So that's obviously
4 times.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's obviously going to affect business. And then there's just unexpected costs, like, you know, just taxes and sort of like overheads and nothing, sort of business rates and, you know, and rent reviews and stuff's always changing. So you have everything set out as you sort of think it would be, and then you're sort of, the next year everything changes. So
so I want to pivot to kind of collaborating with artists and I guess maximizing your relationships with artists. But like as an engineer, I'm still, so producer royalties is a debt collector for producers, like I was kind of telling you off camera. So we help producers get paid for their placements and stuff like that. And I haven't really worked with that many engineers. We worked on a couple, but like, how do engineers kind of get paid? Like, how do, of course it depends on the type of engineer, but yeah.
So I mean, it's much more simpler with engineers. Normally it's just a sort of advance and then point, but it's not always a point. So with me, I'll push for a point, but that's the kind of normal. So you get an advance, then you get a point. And with indie artists, unless they're massive artists, I won't normally push for a point, because accounting that point is quite difficult, you know. So but with a major label artist, I'll definitely push for a point. So
you're saying, as the mixing engineer, you'll get in advance, I guess. But I guess it wouldn't technically, it would just be a fee if you're not getting a point, then it's not an advance, I guess. Okay, so you get a contract for that, you know, that mixing fee, and then they pay you like a flat rate depending on the song, or how's it kind of work on that side?
So what, as in the amount?
I guess the amount, like I guess you get paid, you don't get paid per hour, you get paid per song as a mixing engineer?
So you get paid per song. So recording engineer gets paid per hour, mixing engineer gets paid per song. And then you kind of, how I work, so obviously I can't speak for everyone, but I charge normally based on the caliber of the artist. So it used to be quite simple, as in an indie artist would get paid this and a signed artist would get paid that. Like, you know, obviously the signed artist you would charge more. But now the lines are a bit blurred, because some of the biggest artists in the UK are indie. And, you know, they get the distribution deals, call themselves indie, and they want to pay you like a quarter of the price. But so now I kind of don't judge it on whether they're signed or indie. It's more on the caliber of the artist. And if I want to do it, how much I want to do it. So, you know what I mean? The budget.
So they propose that. I know by now you have a great relationship with, you know, the labels, and I'm sure it's a smooth workflow for you, but I guess if I have maybe
just about
So how does it, I guess, where does the price come from? Do you propose the price? Hey, like they reach out to you, how much does it, do they offer it to you, then you got a counter offer?
So I mean, my tactic normally is to get a budget out of them. I don't want to be the first one putting my cards on the table. So I normally try and get them to put the cards on the table. Or if they're very insistent on asking me a price, I'll just be like, you know, this is my top price. What's your budget? You know? So I just get in their top end.
So you ask, you say, this is my top price. This is my, like, this is how much how will you phrase it, I guess?
I'd normally be like, look, I really like the artist and I really would like to do this project. I normally charge this amount, but as I like the artist, you let me know what budget you have. And sometimes they'll just say, oh, okay, that's fine. And they'll meet your top amount. Or sometimes they'll, you know, go lower and then I can try and meet them.
And with, if you're a recording engineer, where does that kind of price come from? Like how does pricing for that usually work?
Most recording engineers charge based on a couple things. It's like their space. So if you have a nice studio, you might charge more per hour. And then also it's kind of like your ability and your credits. And also obviously you charge the label a higher rate. But I mean, it can be anywhere from like 50 or 30 to £100 an hour, depending on your caliber of sort of level of your skills.
And then how do you wind up getting paid for it? Because I've worked with some producer or engineers who did like a year worth of recording and they never invoiced the label. And then the number that they never actually came to a firm agreement of like, this is how much I will charge this artist for it. But they worked with this artist. And so like, how does that usually, I guess, where does that number, I guess, come from? Do you have to agree to it ahead of time, I guess?
I
like
feel
if you're
like
working with a label artist, I guess.
With a label, you normally can be a bit, it kind of depends, because artists who work for a major, there's, you know, inclusive and exclusive deals. So when you're taking money out of their advance, can get a bit sticky. Normally you have to make it clear with the artist what you're charging, and so that you don't end up in a really awkward position at the end of the project where you're like, oh, I've done 100 hours, you owe me 20 grand, and then they're like, oh, that's coming out of my advance and da. Yeah. But when it's a different type of deal with a label, you can just, I just, as much as you can.
Yeah.
just get it. Just, they've got billions, these labels.
Yeah.
So just
do you know if it comes from, because like a lot of times the label will, it's really the artist money, but like it's written into the contract that you have a recording budget, and that's not going directly in pocket to the artist, but it still needs to be recouped.
Yeah.
But it might still need to be recouped, so it might like still come out of the artist kind of sort of, but at the same time they might not recoup anyways. So if they don't recoup, then that's the label's money. So yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's the situation with these.
No,
artists,
it is definitely.
Depends.
But normally with the recording budgets in the UK, when the artist gets, in my experience, they all expect to spend that money.
Yeah,
they're not really trying to save on the recording budget. So
for sure,
if you can have the relationship where you can work out what the recording budget is, then just charge accordingly.
Yeah,
go for it. Yeah.
So what's kind of, so I guess you kind of mentioned this, but like, if I'm working, all right, so I'm going to do engineering for artist, a major artist. He comes to the studio with me and we don't talk about price. I guess when does that get talked about? Like after that, right after that session, or do they usually talk about price beforehand? Like before they even get to the studio with you?
So, I mean, maybe like 4 years ago, when I was sort of a bit more on the come up, I would not even mention money to an artist when I met them. So I would just say, let's make a song, let's go. And I would just show them what I can do, because you just don't want to create that issue. Nowadays, I mean, back then, not as many people had managers straight away. So I'd normally be talking to the artist and building the rapport, and then eventually you have the conversation about money, But nowadays, you can kind of just avoid that awkwardness and just talk to the manager. So yeah. So just kind of avoid talking about money to the artist and just call the manager outside of the session. Don't make it awkward, and then just go for it.
Okay. So they won't usually talk to you ahead of time, I guess. Like if it's a major
with mixing now, it's
with mixing they do. That would make sense with mixing. I'm just trying to picture like if it's a label, because I've seen that like right now I'm invoicing a label for like $75,000, and like I'm just trying to think of like, and we didn't agree to the price beforehand, but I'm just trying to think like if I'm the artist and I worked with this engineer this entire time, and now I'm about to release the music, and now I never talked to the engineer about the money. I guess I know I'm kind of asking you the same question.
No. It makes sense. So, I mean, obviously with the mixing, normally you have the conversation before. There'll always be a discussion on the price because it's kind of a finishing job, Yeah. But with recording, recording can be, an artist can spend 10 years in recording an album, or they could do it in a week. Mm-hmm. So it's just so sort of, how long is a piece of string? But then building this place as well there's kind of different things. So me as a business owner now, as soon as a label has a big budget and they want to book loads of sessions in the studio, you're charging them for the studio and not just the engineering. So then you can kind of work out the recording budget and sort of make sure they use that budget up.
So they'll reach out, be like, I want to, this artist is about to record his new album, and they'll reach out, the label will reach out, hey, we want to use your studio for this album particularly, and then they'll book like, whatever, a room.
Or you'll just agree a sort of day rate. Yeah, you agree a day rate, and then you'll just keep going until they sort of run out of budget.
Okay, and then you'll provide the engineer, or maybe they'll have a certain engineer, and then they'll keep going until they run out of the budget. That's how they do it. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, most of them do normally run out of the budget and then extend the budget.
Oh, for real? Yeah. Then they have to request more. Do the artists be mindful of the budget usually? Or are they kind of like
no? To be honest,
they just run their shit up.
No, artists just run it up normally, especially when they get signed and they've got their advance.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said before, when it's an inclusive deal, or when the artist is coming out of their advance, then it's much more sort of different conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I want to talk about you getting a point on as an engineer though, because that's something I'd never see in the United States. Like,
okay,
ever.
really?
I don't know. Yeah, no,
Wow.
I personally haven't, but maybe I'm just not working with the caliber of engineers or
no,
seeing
that's
them.
interesting.
Like, yeah, like it's very rare unless they like get the beat placed maybe, and then they'll take out of the producer's cut, like the beat maker's cut. So yeah, so that's something that you see a good amount over here. It's like, I know you're the top guy, so I'm not surprised. Like, so
I mean, every song you should technically get a point in the UK. It's like almost normally standard.
I thought a lot of beat makers just didn't even get the point. So I like a lot of times, you know, like a lot of beat makers don't even get in advance. So
no, I mean,
or anything. So
for me personally, I'll only fight for it if it's like, I'll just say normally it's a point, and if the label push back, then sometimes you can use it as leverage to charge more for the fee.
Yeah.
So then you can boost an extra, 500 or whatever grand onto the fee.
Yeah.
Just to the point. But it all depends on the caliber of the artist as well.
Okay. And you don't get that point until after like your advance and the master recoups or album recoups, or you don't get that?
Yeah,
right?
It's all contract by contract basis. Sometimes they do it on every song that the artist has done under that deal.
Yeah.
So it could be like a 4-album deal, and until they've recouped everything, you're getting a penny.
So you're not getting it on the first record sold. Like it has to be recouped.
Probably not, unless the contract specifies that it's just that one record.
Yeah.
Which it normally doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
They always try and sort of run up the.
Yeah, you gotta get all the yeah. That's my whole shit.
Interesting.
Do you have any issues kind of getting paid as an engineer on your side?
I mean, there's always issues. I mean, in the music industry, I find
working with labels specifically, but of course. Still,
it's just with labels, you're going to get paid, so you don't normally have to worry about that. It's more just how long it's going to take.
You think you think so? You know you're going to get paid
for an engineer.
For an engineer,
yeah, because I don't think I've ever had a situation where a label has not paid me.
8 was mentioning that you're pretty persistent on the follow-ups, like every Monday that you try to follow up. So you still feel like you would always get paid if you didn't follow up every week?
From a major, I normally find, but not from indie projects. Okay. Because you never know what's going on with an indie project, or if you haven't managed to get the payment before the album drops and the artist doesn't do as well as they think, they're not contractually obliged to do anything. Yeah. You're not going to take them to court. You can maybe take the song down, but if it hasn't performed what they want anyway, they're probably not going to. So indie artists, you need to make sure you get paid. Labels generally in the UK, it's normally alright. Yeah. Normally always guaranteed to get paid if it's contracted.
And so you'll just reach out, like if you haven't been paid, how do you kind of approach it? You reach out to A&R, or kind of like their
just kind of being persistent, like just really, really persistent. So you just gotta. It's funny in the UK because I'm not sure in America if it's the same way, but the response times from an A&R when they want something, maybe a minute or two.
Yeah.
The response times for an A&R when you're chasing an invoice, at least 2 weeks, or there's always some sort of excuse. So it's just about being persistent, staying on top of everything, and then if they know you're not going to go away, they'll sort it out.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's the story of my life. Like we work with so many A&Rs, and you would think they just are never on their email, but then as soon as they want something done, they reply right away. Yeah. And as soon as so
it's frustrating.
Yeah. That's so crazy. Well, this is you touched on so much. I learned so much from this one, bro. Like on the I think you gave a lot of insight for people who want to make it as like a ton of value. It's hard to find online. So thank you so much, bro. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man.
Cool.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.